Market Journal, television for agricultural business decisions, is a presentation of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources.
Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine.
Hello everyone, I'm Troy Moling and thanks for joining us today on Market Journal. Glad to see you, and another week of 2021 is almost in the books, if you can believe it. Beginning our broadcast today, raising cattle can be a time-consuming and costly endeavor, and beyond things like breeding expenses and veterinary costs, there are three main categories that'll inevitably make up a bulk of your annual expenses. Market Journal's Bill Dodd recently caught up with Nebraska Extension beef educator Aaron Berger to discuss those expenses and how to best manage them.
When analyzing annual input costs for cattle production, you will undoubtedly notice there are three expenses in particular that'll make up a bulk of your budget, the largest of which is feed. This one expense could be well over half of your yearly production costs. However, land ownership can play a key role in determining your final expense.
Typically, feed costs to run a cow annually run from around 40 to 70% of the annual cow cost. So, differences between operations can be on how much harvested feed they have, and then also depending on if you own the land or if you're going out and you're renting the grass. So if you own the land, that cost may be less, but don't forget the value of that grass is really a return to land ownership. And so if we want to look at what's the value being generated by the cow-calf enterprise, we really need to take into account the value of grass from the land that we own. Feed, I think if you're thinking about purchasing harvested feed, you want to think about what's the cost to go out and acquire that feed. And then it's not only the cost to get it, but the cost of storage and the cost of feeding the delivery. So we really want to get to a cost per pound of energy or cost per pound of protein to get that feed into the cow. And that really gives us an opportunity to then compare different feed options to one another.
Next on the list is labor and equipment. Needless to say, the larger the operation, the more hands that will be needed. As these two expenses usually go hand in hand, it's important to understand how equipment is purchased to reduce labor, while labor is needed to operate said equipment. This fixed overhead cost usually doesn't fluctuate too much based on the number of cattle in the herd. On the other hand, it's important to factor in equipment depreciation to the overall cost.
So to think about the labor side, if you hire someone, obviously the cost of labor is what you have invested in employing that person. If you own the business and you're taking a family withdrawal or a family living withdrawal, then you want to go ahead and make sure you take accurate account of that against the enterprises that you're working in. And if cow-calf is one of those, you need to make sure you identify that clearly. On the equipment side, we have the obvious cash cost, things like taxes, insurance, licensing of a piece of equipment, interest if we have money borrowed on that piece of equipment. We don't want to forget about depreciation. Depreciation is a major expense on equipment. It's a non-cash cost, but if we're going to stay in business, at some point that tractor, the four-wheeler, the livestock trailer, that working facility are going to have to be replaced. And we want to make sure we take into account those costs as well.
While equipment depreciation is a looming factor, cow depreciation can make up a good share of the overall cost as well. Many times, the cost of getting a bred heifer into your herd can remain hidden due to the fact that many ranchers may raise their own replacement heifers. While it's very important to find ways to maximize the number of years a cow will be productive in the herd, there are a couple things to keep in mind when calculating cattle depreciation expenses related to your operation.
So think about the cow-calf enterprise. Again, this is a non-cash cost for many folks if they raise their own replacements. It costs us a certain amount to get that replacement heifer or to get that bred cow into the herd. If you're going out and buying a bred replacement, obviously you have the purchase price of that female, and then she has a value hopefully when she leaves the herd. So purchase price minus value when she leaves the herd, that's depreciation. And that's a cost, again, that you don't get an invoice in the mail for, a bill, but it's a real cost because if we're going to maintain the cow herd, we're going to have to come up with capital to replace that cow when she leaves the herd.
As 2021 is just starting off, it's a very advantageous time to calculate any and all expenses to your cow-calf enterprises by really examining these three major expenses. This could help you determine where there might be more cost-effective opportunities to improve profitability for the upcoming year. With that in mind, producers have an upcoming opportunity to help them further develop their skills in calculating the cost of production. as Nebraska Extension is offering a unit cost of production workshop in Valentine, Nebraska this February. This could greatly assist producers in developing and implementing a more efficient plan of action for their particular operation.
So coming up next February 3rd and 4th in Valentine, Nebraska, we're going to be having a 2-day unit cost production workshop. In this workshop, we're going to actually look at an example ranch in the Sandhills of Nebraska that owns land. They also have a cow-calf enterprise, a hay enterprise, and they develop their own replacement heifers. We're going to look at the cost associated with each of those different enterprises and how they interact with one another. And then through that analysis, we're also going to look at where's opportunities where this ranch can make changes to improve profitability. The fun thing about using a sample ranch like this is that we can do whatever we want because it's not one of our own, right? There's no personal values or things tied to it. So we can feel free to poke holes at or explore different opportunities. So for folks who come into that, they're going to be able to work through this sample ranch with us. We'll also provide an Excel-based spreadsheet that they can take home to plug in their own numbers for their own operation. And really the interaction we have, the questions we ask, the conversation that occurs really is where the value is for people who attend, because those conversations really are going to be around things that apply to their own operation.
While it's always important to consider ways to make sensible changes, taking some time to evaluate these major expenses would be beneficial to your operation, and the time to do so is as good as it will be for the remainder of the year. Reporting for Market Journal, I'm Bill Dodd.
Thanks, Bill. Time now to get a look at what's making news in the markets. Jeff Peterson, president of Heartland Farm Partners, joined me this week. And last Tuesday's USDA report reignited a bull run in the corn market after a smaller than expected 2020 U.S. corn harvest tightened stocks to the slimmest margin in years. And we're keeping our eyes on South America to see what happens with the soybean crop ahead of their harvest. We got Jeff's thoughts on all that and a whole lot more, but we began with a look at ethanol. Where have prices been and where do we see them going?
Yeah, what's interesting here is prices have actually, they bounced up kind of coming into towards the end of last week. Now, unfortunately though, we've seen actually a little bit of a pullback happen on the ethanol price, but it was good to see the bounce up. Overall, ethanol production, it's interesting as we dig into the numbers, Troy, we're down about on the numbers that came out last week, 14.1% is the ethanol production. Now, actually, we're thinking year to date, and we like to look at those year to date numbers. That'd be from the crop year to date, going back from September 1st, down about 7.9%. The concerning part though is USDA is looking for us to be up about 2%. But as we dig deeper into the numbers at our current pace, believe it or not, we would actually come in about 6% ahead of last year. So I think USDA numbers are still okay yet.
And talk to us about how the corn rally has impacted ethanol margins.
Oh, it's hurt them. And the biggest thing is, as we dig into those margins, as a matter of fact, this is probably as bad as the margins have been going back to about the middle of April last year, when we had the big pullback because of what we had on COVID and the slow up and the less miles driven. Now, we did probably bottom out on our margins back on January 12th, so we've seen a slight improvement here, but it's an area that we're concerned about. We're gonna have to watch very close because that's one of the first areas that we'll probably see some reduction in demand coming in.
All right, let's move internationally. Let's talk about South America. People interested in what the weather's like right now in South America, interested in harvest that's going to be starting up in South America. And of course, folks here in the U.S. wondering how's that going to be impacting soybeans. So what do you think?
Yeah, it's right in the driver's seat right now. It's interesting to think about how big a country Brazil and then Argentina is. If we go to Mato Grosso, where harvest actually got started around the 28th of December, but it's going slow. They're only about 1% harvested in Mato Grosso, and that compares to last year about 5%, and on average about 4.5%. But overall, we'd say they're about 2 to 3 weeks behind. And we're gonna have to watch that very close because it's got an impact on beans first, because there's some concern about where the yields are gonna come in. But I think we've been seeing enough moisture in Brazil and also so far in Argentina that we probably would say the crop is kind of stabilizing. We do have some further concerns down the road though for Argentina, because we think there could be some dryness that could come in later. But the big thing we're gonna have to really watch going forward though, Troy, is we're gonna have to watch that safrinha corn crop. That safrinha corn crop will be getting planted here right after this bean crop gets harvested. harvested, and that crop is needed very much in the world market. So we're going to have to watch how that gets in the ground. We'll have to watch how those growing conditions are for that crop going forward.
And when we look at the acreage story for corn and soybeans here in the U.S., what are some scenarios we could be seeing for 2021?
Yeah, as we kind of dig into the numbers, and it's always good this time of year to kind of take a look at that. We've got the January data dump out of the way, and some of our research as we dig into the numbers would suggest that we need probably 7.5 to 8 million more acres of soybeans just to keep our ending stocks stable. And that's not even growing them any. And then over on the corn side, corn actually could probably go unchanged on acres. And the first question that happens is, where will those acres come from? And it's hard to believe, but we got to think back. We had a lot of prevent plant last year. As a matter of fact, across corn, beans, and wheat, there was about 8.9 million acres. Now, every year there's prevent plant, on average about 3.4 million acres of prevent plant. But our thoughts would be, as this year, it might be somewhere closer to 2.5. To give you a reference point, when things were really dry, back in 2012, it got all the way down to 1 million acres of prevent plant. So as a result of that, we're saying there's going to be some acres that will come from the prevent plant side. We're calling prevent plant right now about 2.5 million. So there might be about 6.5 million acres from that. The other thing that will happen, and where some of these increase in bean acres will come from the double crop bean side. Normally double crop beans, if we looked at a wide range, would make up from 3 to 10% of our planted acres. Last year we were about 5% of the acres were double crop. We think that number will bump up to about 8%, so that'll gain us about 3 million acres. So we'll pull some from prevent plant, we'll get some from the double crop, and that'll give us, our 7.5, 8 million. Now the problem will be, though, if we don't have good weather conditions, we may even need more acres than that. So there's going to be quite a battle coming as we come into the spring, and there'll be a lot of talk about it.
When we look at this rally that we've been seeing, late 2020 into 2021 with corn and soybeans, do you see any triggers that could maybe turn this rally around and take away some of the bullishness that we've been seeing?
Yeah, there are a number of them, because if we start first on soybeans, the biggest thing that everybody's asking, because we've got already 92% of the sales on the books of what USDA believes we're going to have for the full year. And as a result of that, everybody's going, did we see these other countries, and mainly a lot of it's China, did they buy early or are they going to buy more? So as we go and get further down the road and we start seeing some more production and harvesting coming out of Brazil, and that actually makes its way into the export channels, if we start seeing some exports that are canceled in larger number, that will be a sign that, they're switching over, they didn't need all of our beans. The other thing will be if we'd see really good weather conditions happening in South America, so that there was no longer any concern about production, because the thing that we can't have happen here is we can't have that South American crop get smaller and we have to be able to send out more beans because we just don't have many more to physically send out. So I'd say that's a couple of big keys we'll really be watching for.
Okay, you have given us some great info on corn and soybeans. Tell us wheat's story in all this. What is wheat's role right now?
Yeah, it's been interesting. At times, wheat's been kind of lagging along. It's been going up, and then occasionally it sticks its head up and takes the lead. But there's kind of a little bit of a story developing. If you take a look first at Russia, which would be the #1 exporting nation, they're wanting to try to slow up the rate at which they're exporting their wheat, because they're having some problem with the food inflation within the country. And so they've got a tax that goes on February 15th, additional tax that it looks like they'll get in place for March 15th going forward, and that may carry all the way out to July. The other thing that's being talked about a little bit is the same type of thing coming out of Argentina. So I'd say overall we've got a tightening happening on the world supply, and we also take a look at the demand side, and we look to China, and China's a big user of wheat. And a few things have been quietly happening behind the scenes. They had just auctioned off about 3.9 million metric tons of wheat, and on that particular auction there, that represented almost 99.5% of what was offered. But quietly, since we go back all the way to October, they've actually auctioned off about 30 million metric tons of wheat. So they're having to pull out of some of their own reserves to be able to make sure that they've got enough. So we got to watch that wheat situation. I would say there's plenty of wheat out there in all the exporting countries, but it is definitely tightening up.
Fun time to be an analyst right now, huh?
Oh, it is a lot of fun.
Okay, any other marketing risk management strategies that you want to leave us with today that we haven't discussed?
Yeah, exactly. I'd say right now what we want to do is that we really want to take this time of year to make sure you understand what you've got left for your old crop bushels, and more importantly, make sure you understand what's going to trigger those sales, because we don't ever know necessarily when the high is going to come in. You know, I don't think we've seen it, but it's possible that we had, but I think we'll see some higher prices. So we just have to make sure we get crystal clear what's going to cause us to be able to sell those old crop, and then to be able to get started on those new crop sales. And this is the perfect time of the year to get started on that.
Next week, we'll head out to Briggs Feed Yard for a conversation with none other than Mike Briggs. If you have a question you'd like for me to ask him, email us or get in touch on social media, and I'll pass your question along. Next up, according to Stanford University's Center on Food Security and the Environment, 820 million people around the world don't have enough to eat. That food insecurity can cause instability and exacerbate many of today's national security challenges. The University of Nebraska's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources recently hosted a member of the U.S. Department of Homeland Security to learn how Nebraska farmers can play a role in keeping the nation secure. The past year has taught us a lot about ourselves, the world, and agriculture. Even if the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic have been minimal to you personally, you've likely seen firsthand how detrimental bottlenecks in the food supply chain can be. We all remember the headlines from last spring: meat plants suspending operations temporarily due to coronavirus outbreaks in their workforce. This was, of course, as many of us were under stay-at-home orders and the demand for meat was increasing. Fortunately, the United States has a highly developed agricultural sector and can navigate these types of challenges. But that isn't always the case in other countries. As a result, an interruption in that food supply, whether due to a pandemic, a war, a natural disaster, or an intentional agro-terrorism act, can cause instability. That can have ripple effects to the United States or our allies and be a threat to national security. Last month, the University of Nebraska's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources and the National Strategic Research Institute welcomed David Richardson, Assistant Secretary for the Department of Homeland Security's Countering Weapons of Mass Destruction Office. It was an opportunity to understand how national security and the food supply intersect.
For example, in Romania and Vietnam right now, their African swine flu is in the swine population, or the hog population, or the pig population, whichever you refer to it as. And it is devastating their hog industry. We don't want that here. We have scientists working on that now to stop African swine flu from coming here. We're just talking about hogs. We're not talking about, we didn't mention chickens, we didn't mention cow, we didn't talk about corn or any of that. So in every one of these sectors, there's a risk of some type of damage to America and to our way of life.
Richardson is the highest ranking official in the Department of Homeland Security to visit IANR. He spent part of his visit touring facilities and learning how IANR research programs can lead to a more resilient and accessible U.S. food system.
And the neat thing about Nebraska, as you well know, is we have 7 different agroecology zones. So Lincoln looks a lot different than North Platte. North Platte looks a lot different than Harrison or Scottsbluff or O'Neill or Falls City. So we take advantage of the diversity of our soils, our water, our precip, our temperatures, our wind patterns, and we can actually use Nebraska as a test bed, a proving ground for the innovation that moved from ideas and discovery to practice.
With a wealth of agricultural research, Nebraska is uniquely positioned to help combat a potential security threat. And through a statewide network of partnerships with scientists and producers, the goal of making the country safer can come closer to being realized.
I think when we think about agro-security, biosecurity, does somebody have the intent to do harm using a disease-causing organism? And truth be told, today's conversation is about how do you bring the basic science and the teaching and the learning together as we think about the threat of a biological incident. And it's a perfect marriage as far as I'm concerned.
information is power. So the more information you have on whatever the zoonotic diseases or diseases that get into a food population or crop or crops, and most of it's information and taking action on it. So deter, detect, protect. That's a matter of having the information. So the more information you get, the more you can do about any these type of diseases.
Really interesting information. That was a great event to be a part of. Moving on, Nebraska has made big gains in both the value of organic products sold and the number of certified organic farming operations in the state since 2016. According to a USDA National Agricultural Statistics Service 2019 survey, Nebraska nearly doubled the value of organic livestock, crops, and farm products since 2016, selling a total of nearly $185 million in 2019. The number of certified organic operations also grew to 238. That was an increase of 47% since 2016. You can get a detailed breakdown of all the numbers related to this organic production survey in the January Nebraska Farmer. Time now for weather with Nebraska Extension Ag Climatologist and Market Journal Chief Meteorologist Al Dutcher. Al, we had a pretty stable weather pattern to start the week, but what are we seeing out there now?
Well, Troy, we certainly did see some rather cool conditions at the beginning of the week, and then we've seen that moderation of temperatures. We had to deal with wind during the middle part of the week, and now we have an impending storm system that's moving through the region that's creating quite a tricky forecast. Little time to really get into a lot of discussion, so let's get right away to the upper air models and see what we can expect. Draw your attention that we have a northern stream energy and a southern stream energy, and we're kind of caught in between the two of them. So at the surface, we're going to start to see low pressure to the southwest of us in southern Kansas that is going to basically pull moisture up, plus a low pressure at the surface in eastern Montana. That's going to spread snowfall basically across the northern plains region, and then this should start to fill in as the day progresses from the south, or as it moves toward the south. We should see a mixed of rain and snowfall across eastern Nebraska, and then we will see that some of that reside into tomorrow as the low pressure still hangs around across the northern plains, and we see the main energy from the southern stream try to push some of that energy to the east of us. However, we still keep that main, basically that main upper air low pressure system in the upper atmosphere to the southwest, and it's going to kick out additional energy as we go into Monday and Tuesday. So we'll start to see an expanding area of precipitation that will move just to the east-southeast of us. Looks like southeast and east central Nebraska are in the best location for accumulating snowfall with this system. And yet, as we get into Tuesday, we still see a surface low basically down in the Texas Panhandle that will continue to pump moisture up into the region, although the overall precipitation pattern itself should start to slide toward the central and eastern Corn Belt. And we will start to see a rapid return to above normal conditions as temporary ridging builds in as we get into Wednesday. Be a little cooler to the east, but certainly above normal conditions will develop across western Nebraska, and we may return to the 40s and 50s there, 30s and 40s in eastern Nebraska, as we see a little piece of snowfall move toward the east of us. As we get into Thursday, that ridge is centered right in the middle of the country. Very warm conditions. We're probably looking at highs widespread, 40s to up to maybe even 60 across portions of southwestern Nebraska. And as we get into the day, Thursday evening, we'll see snow breaking out across the western United States, and that trough will start to progress toward the east and split that energy once again to the south and the north. We have a low pressure at the surface that's projected to develop as we get into Friday just to our southwest, but the main energy will remain affluent to the west of us, and we look for that as it progresses eastward to either keep the energy to the south of us, or we will start to reemerge this energy as we get into the first part of February and develop once again another weather maker in our region. So the 8 to 14 day forecast with that ridge building in late next week, keep the warmer than normal conditions in terms of precipitation, also drier conditions with that ridge, but the wetness does return. So Troy, overall, get through this weekend, and we got a fairly nice week next week before things turn south once again.
Thanks, Al. We'll end things today with some FSA updates to tell you about. In recent weeks, USDA and FSA announced the Quality Loss Adjustment Program, otherwise known as QLA. This program aims to provide assistance to producers who may have seen crop quality losses due to natural disasters that occurred in 2018 and 2019. Eligible crops include those where federal crop insurance or non-insured crop disaster assistance program coverage is available. Additionally, crops that were fed to livestock or that are in storage may be eligible. However, crops that were destroyed before harvest or suffered from deterioration in storage are not eligible. Assistance is based on a producer's harvested affected production of an eligible crop, which must have at least a 5% quality loss. When applying for QLA, you'll be asked to provide documentation to support any claims of loss. All producers receiving QLA payments are required to purchase crop insurance or NAP coverage for the next 2 available crop years at the 60% coverage level or higher. The deadline to apply for this program is March 5th. And beyond QLA, other FSA deadlines include the 2021 Agricultural Risk Coverage and Price Loss Coverage Election and Enrollment. Those are better known as ARC and PLC. The ARC program provides income support tied to historical base acres rather than current production of covered commodities. With PLC payments, they're issued when the effective price of a covered commodity is less than the respective reference price for that commodity. This year, producers are given the option to make new elections between the 2 programs. It's important to note if you don't make a new election on either program, your previous selection is going to roll over. If you'd like to make a different election, you must sign up by March 15th. Other programs of note include the Conservation Reserve Program and Livestock Forage Disaster Program. The sign-up deadline for CRP is February 12th. Those wishing to apply for the Livestock Forage Disaster Program have until February 1st. Okay, so I know you've been hit with a lot of information here, so for more on these programs, you can visit the Nebraska FSA website, and you can find that along with additional information all on the Market Journal website. That's going to do it for this week's show. If you missed a story, be sure to download the Market Journal mobile app, or you can follow us on social media to join in on the conversation. And don't forget, you can get the latest updates on the coronavirus outbreak at covid19.unl.edu. Hope to see you right back here next time. I'm Troy Moling. Thanks for watching.
Join Market Journal online at marketjournal.unl.edu. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine. Market Journal is produced by the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources.